Narration. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. And before we dive in, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The sky over the small Texas college town hangs low and gray, a thin drizzle tapping against the windows of the nearly empty cafe. Mark Davis pushes open the door, a stack of casebooks heavy in his backpack, but not nearly as heavy as the debt letters waiting back home. At 23, he is stretched thin between his final year of law school, a part-time job that barely covers groceries, and medical bills left behind by his late father. Every dollar feels like a crisis. Every day feels like a countdown. He wipes the rain from his hair and checks his phone again, hoping for good news. There is none. A notification flashes, payment overdue. His stomach twists. He tries to steady his breath, but the pressure feels like a hand around his chest. Then another notification appears. Unknown number. Mark Davis, this is Eleanor Brooks. I would like to meet with you. It is about your financial situation. Brooks Bistro. 7 o'clock. He reads it twice. Eleanor Brooks. The name rings heavy, like a courthouse door. Everyone in town knows it. Philanthropist. Business owner. A woman with more power than anyone Mark has ever met in his life. And she wants to talk to him. About his debts. His first thought is that it must be a mistake. His second is that he cannot afford not to show up. At 7 sharp, he arrives at Brooks Bistro, an upscale place with soft lighting and fresh roses on every table. He hesitates before stepping in, drenched from the rain, painfully aware of his worn jacket and scuffed shoes. A server gestures toward the back. She is waiting for you. Eleanor Brooks sits with perfect posture, silver hair swept back, a tailored navy suit making her look like she stepped out of a magazine. Her hands rest neatly around a porcelain cup of tea. Her blue eyes lift to his, steady and unreadable. Mr. Davis, she says, her voice smooth, almost clinical. Please sit. Mark lowers himself into the chair, nerves buzzing. Ma'am, I am not sure why I am here. I do not even know how you know about my situation. Eleanor folds her hands. I know enough. I know your father's illness left you with significant debt. I know your mother is still undergoing treatment. I know your part-time income cannot support all of you. Mark's breath catches. He feels both exposed and strangely seen. What do you want from me? Eleanor tilts her head slightly. A partnership. A mutually beneficial agreement. The rain outside grows louder against the windows. Her next words fall like a stone between them. I want you to marry me. Mark blinks, convinced he misheard. I am sorry, what? Marry me, she repeats, calm as if discussing the weather. Not for romance. For practicality. A contract marriage. You will receive financial security, assistance for your family, and protection from creditors. In return, you will be my husband in name. Nothing more. Mark swallows hard. The room suddenly too warm. You do not even know me. That is precisely the point, she replies. You are young, unattached, and desperate enough to consider what others would refuse. I do not need love, Mr. Davis. I need a husband for legal and legacy reasons. A pause. A soft sip of tea. You fill the role. Mark pushes back his chair and stands abruptly, the legs scraping against the polished floor. This is insane. You are asking me to marry a woman who is practically a stranger. Eleanor meets his panic with stillness. I am offering you freedom. Stability. A future. Mark feels a tremor run through him. The weight of his family. His mother's trembling hands. His sister's tuition. His father's voice telling him to take care of them. He feels trapped between pride and necessity. Eleanor fixes him with a steady gaze. Think about it. But do not take too long. My offer does not stay open forever. As Mark steps back out into the rain, his mind is spinning. Lightning cracks in the distance, and he wonders if this meeting was a lifeline, or a storm he is walking straight into. Narration. The next morning, Mark woke up to the sound of rain still tapping against his window. The weight of last night's conversation lingered, a dull ache in the pit of his stomach. He couldn't shake off Eleanor's words. Marry me. A contract marriage. His mind kept running in circles. It was absurd. It was wrong. But it was also an opportunity, one he might not get again. Mark ran his fingers through his damp hair, standing in front of his cluttered desk. His eyes fell on the pile of bills, the overdue notices, the letters from the hospital with urgent stamped across them. He felt like he was drowning, and yet Eleanor had thrown him a lifeline. But could he trust her? He had barely known her, and yet she was offering him everything he needed to keep his family afloat. His heart raced as his phone buzzed on the table, snapping him from his thoughts. The message was simple. Eleanor Brooks. Meet me at Brooks Bistro. Noon. He hesitated for a moment before responding with a simple, I'll be there. He knew this was a turning point. He couldn't let it slip away. At exactly noon, Mark stepped back into the bistro, the same one from the night before. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, but the chill in the air was still there. He was nervous, but there was a new sense of determination in his step. He had made up his mind. Eleanor was already sitting at their table, her posture as immaculate as ever, her calm demeanor never wavering. The moment she saw him, she smiled faintly, motioning for him to sit. Mark slid into the chair across from her, feeling the weight of her gaze on him. Mr. Davis, she began, her voice steady as always. I trust you've had time to think about my proposal. Mark took a deep breath, glancing around the room, trying to calm his nerves. I've thought about it a lot. He paused, staring down at his hands. I don't understand why you want to do this. Why me? I'm just a law student. I don't have anything to offer you. Eleanor's eyes softened, but only for a moment. You may not have wealth, Mr. Davis, but you have something I need. Someone who isn't tied to my world of business and expectations. Someone who can help me maintain my position, my legacy. A partnership, not of love, but of necessity. Mark leaned forward, slightly, feeling the weight of her words. He had thought about what she said, and the more he thought, the more he realized how little he had to lose. And if I say yes? He asked, his voice low. Eleanor's expression remained unchanged, her calm never faltering. If you say yes, you'll receive financial stability. You won't have to worry about your family's future. You'll be free from the pressure that has been crushing you. She paused, letting the silence hang in the air between them. You'll have the opportunity to breathe again, Mr. Davis. To focus on your future, your work. Mark swallowed hard. Everything she said made sense. It was exactly what he needed, but it still didn't feel real. It felt like a dream, and he was afraid of waking up to find it all gone. What's the catch? He asked. Eleanor's lips curved into a small smile. There is no catch. Only a contract, and the terms are simple. We remain married for 1 year. In that time, we share a life. But there will be no romantic involvement, no personal connection beyond what's required for the arrangement. No surprises. She reached into her bag, pulling out a sleek envelope and sliding it across the table to him. If you agree, we will make everything official. You and your family will be taken care of. I will handle the rest. Mark stared at the envelope. He could see the contract inside, the lines of text that would change his life forever. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Was this really happening? Was he really about to sign away his life for the sake of a deal? You'll have a place to live, a steady income, and all the financial help you need. Your mother's bills will be covered. Your sister's tuition will be taken care of. Everything. Eleanor's voice was like a promise. He could feel it sinking in, pulling him deeper into her world. Mark glanced up at her, searching her face for any sign of deceit. But all he saw was calm certainty. She meant every word. And if I don't agree? He asked quietly. Eleanor's gaze was steady, her smile unchanged. Then nothing changes. You continue the way you are now. Struggling. Alone. Mark hesitated. He knew what that meant. He would lose his family's home, his future, everything. He couldn't afford to let that happen. His heart was racing, but the path forward was clear. The decision wasn't easy, but the stakes were too high. He reached for the envelope and opened it slowly, the weight of his future in his hands. Narration. Mark's fingers hovered over the contract, his mind racing. Every word felt like a heavy weight pressing down on him. He stared at the lines of text, each one offering something he desperately needed, but each one also reminded him of what he was giving up. A year of his life in exchange for his family's future. It seemed like the only option. He had been drowning in debt, barely keeping his head above water. The thought of his mother's hospital bills, his sister's tuition, he couldn't let them down. But this contract, this marriage to a stranger, felt like it was swallowing him whole. Eleanor watched him with a quiet intensity, waiting for his decision. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the cool certainty in her eyes. She wasn't asking for love. She was asking for a partnership, a business deal, nothing more. He took a deep breath and reached for the pen. His hand shook slightly as he signed his name at the bottom of the contract. It was done. Eleanor slid the contract back into the envelope, her smile soft but satisfied. "Welcome to our partnership, Mr. Davis," she said, her voice smooth and steady. Mark nodded, still processing everything. He had made his choice, but the enormity of it hadn't fully hit him yet. "What happens now?" he asked. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, her posture perfect. "Now we begin. You will start living with me, as husband and wife in name only. You will accompany me to public events, handle legal matters with my company, and in return, everything you need will be provided." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Your life will change, Mark. This is your chance to start fresh." Mark glanced around the bistro, feeling suddenly out of place. Everything felt surreal, like he was a character in someone else's story. But as much as he wanted to deny it, Eleanor was right. He needed this. He needed the stability, the protection from the storm that had been crashing over him for months. "How soon do we start?" he asked, his voice low. Eleanor's smile widened slightly. "Immediately. I'll have my driver take you to my estate. We'll go over the next steps there." Mark nodded, standing up from the table. As he walked toward the door, he felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he might actually have a chance. The car ride to Eleanor's estate was silent. The city passed by in a blur of lights and shadows. Mark's mind was a whirlwind, his thoughts circling around the contract he had just signed, the life he was about to start. Eleanor sat next to him, her expression calm, unreadable. He couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking, what she truly wanted from him. When they arrived, the grand gates of the estate opened, revealing a sprawling mansion that seemed to stretch on forever. Mark stepped out of the car, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never seen a house so grand, so imposing. Eleanor led him inside, her heels clicking on the marble floors as they walked through the grand entrance. The walls were adorned with portraits, expensive art, and rich tapestries. Everything about the house screamed wealth and power. Mark felt small in comparison. He followed Eleanor down a long hallway to a large, well-furnished room. She motioned for him to sit. "This is where you will stay. It's yours for as long as our arrangement lasts." Mark glanced around, taking in the lavish furniture, the grand windows that looked out over the perfectly manicured gardens. It was a far cry from his cramped apartment. He felt a pang of guilt, but also relief. He had made it. He had finally found a way out. "I know this is a lot to take in," Eleanor said, her voice softening for the first time. "But I promise, Mark, this is the best thing for both of us. You will have everything you need here. Everything." Mark looked at her, his emotions mixed. "And you? What do you get out of this?" Eleanor's eyes met his, her expression unreadable. "What I get, Mr. Davis, is security, control, the ability to keep my legacy intact." She paused, letting the words settle. "This marriage will protect me from what's coming, and in return, I'll protect you." Mark didn't know what to say. Her words hung in the air. Between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. She was offering him everything: stability, protection, a future for his family. But in exchange, he was giving up his freedom. For the next year, his life would be dictated by this arrangement. He was a husband in name only, but the rules of the game had changed, and he had to play by them. Eleanor looked at him, her expression softening just slightly. "I'll leave you to settle in. You'll find everything you need in the room. Dinner is at 8. As she turned to leave, Mark's eyes followed her. He had made his decision. He had taken the deal. And now, there was no turning back. Narration: the next few days passed in a blur for Mark. He spent most of his time adjusting to the strange new life he had stepped into. Eleanor's mansion, with its sprawling rooms and quiet halls, felt like a different world. The opulence was overwhelming, and he couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. The house was vast, filled with antique furniture, grand chandeliers, and artwork that seemed to whisper of old money and generations of wealth. Each day, Eleanor would give him a new set of instructions, attend a meeting with her lawyers, handle some of her business affairs, or accompany her to a gala or charity event. She had made it clear from the start that their marriage was purely for show, and that was exactly how it was. They lived together, shared the space, but there was no intimacy, no warmth between them. Eleanor never spoke of the deal in any personal terms. It was always business, always about keeping up appearances. At the charity gala that first weekend, Mark had felt like an imposter. Surrounded by the city's wealthiest and most powerful people, he was just the husband in name only. He watched as Eleanor glided through the crowd, greeting people with practiced smiles and firm handshakes. He could see the way they all deferred to her, how her presence seemed to command the room. He, on the other hand, was barely noticed, standing off to the side like a prop in her perfectly curated world. But then, a few hours into the event, Eleanor caught his eye from across the room. She was talking to a group of businessmen, but her gaze flicked over to him, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. There was something there, something deeper than the cold professionalism she always exuded. It was fleeting, but it was enough to make Mark pause. What was she thinking? Did she see him as more than just a pawn in her game? He couldn't tell. The rest of the night passed in a blur of mingling, fake smiles, and whispered conversations. But as they left the event, Eleanor turned to him with a slight smile. "You did well tonight," she said, her voice almost softer than usual. Mark nodded, unsure of what to say. "I'm just doing what I'm supposed to," he replied, his voice low. "What's expected?" Eleanor's gaze lingered on him for a moment, before she turned away, slipping into the back seat of the car. "Exactly," she said, her tone cool again. The drive back to the mansion was silent, save for the hum of the engine. Mark's mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. Was it just the contract, or was there something more between them? He couldn't quite put his finger on it. He had been in this strange, new world for only a few days, and already it felt like everything was shifting. The line between what was real and what was fake was starting to blur. That night, as he lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor. She was so different from anyone he had ever met. Strong, confident, calculated. And yet, there were moments, like the brief flicker of vulnerability he had seen earlier that evening, when he wondered if there was more to her than the cold, businesslike exterior. He rolled over, pulling the blankets tighter around him, and sighed. He had made his choice. This was the life he had chosen, one of security, stability, but also one of distance. He had agreed to this arrangement, and now he had to live with it. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a question lingered. Was this all just a deal? Or was there something more? The next morning, Eleanor was already up and about, as if nothing had changed. Her presence filled the house, commanding attention even in the quiet moments. Mark got up and dressed quickly, the weight of the day ahead already hanging over him. As he walked down the hallway, he could hear Eleanor's voice coming from the library, discussing something with one of her assistants. He paused for a moment, just outside the door, unsure of whether to enter. The life he had agreed to was real in so many ways, but the questions still swirled in his mind. Was he just a business partner in this arrangement, or was there something else at play here? His thoughts were interrupted when Eleanor stepped out of the library, her expression as composed as ever. She barely glanced at him before speaking. "We have a meeting with the board this afternoon," she said. "Make sure you're prepared." Mark nodded. "I'll be ready." He didn't say anything more, just followed her down the hall. The day passed quickly in a whirlwind of meetings, formalities, and brief exchanges. Mark could feel the distance between them growing, like an invisible wall that separated their worlds. He had agreed to this arrangement, but as time went on, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing himself in the process. It was all starting to feel like a game, and he wasn't sure who the players were anymore. Narration. As the weeks went by, Mark settled deeper into his new life with Eleanor. The days blended together in a routine that left little room for anything personal. Meetings, charity events, business dinners. He was her ever-present husband, always by her side, always on display, but never truly seen. He had started to get used to the cold, calculated interactions, the polite distance between them. Eleanor was always professional, always in control, never showing the faintest crack in her facade. And Mark? He was just the man who stood next to her. At first, it felt strange, this life of luxury, of being constantly surrounded by wealth and power. But over time, it began to feel normal. The grand estate, the staff, the endless social events, the money that flowed easily through Eleanor's business dealings. But Mark was still haunted by the emptiness of it all. He had made this deal for the sake of his family, But as he spent more time in Eleanor's world, he started to feel like a stranger in his own life. He was living in a mansion, yes. He had everything he could have wanted: money, security, a future for his family. But he had nothing real. No connection. No love. No warmth. Just a contract. Just a partnership. One night, Eleanor asked him to attend a gala with her. It was another one of those high society events, with the city's elite all gathered in their best suits and gowns. Mark had learned to play the part, to smile when necessary, to nod and shake hands when required. But as they walked into the grand ballroom, Mark felt a pang of isolation. He stood at her side as she spoke with business partners, a bright smile on her face, her every move carefully calculated. She was in her element, and he was just a shadow. As the night wore on, Eleanor's attention was drawn away by a group of influential guests. Mark found himself alone by the large windows, staring out at the city lights. He could hear the soft hum of conversation behind him, but it felt like he was on the outside looking in. For a moment, he wondered if this was all he would ever be, just a figure in her world, never fully part of it. Then, as if sensing his discomfort, Eleanor approached him. She smiled politely, her eyes scanning the room before locking with his. "Are you enjoying yourself?" she asked, her voice cool but not unkind. Mark glanced around, unsure of how to answer. "I'm just adjusting," he said quietly. "It's a lot to take in." Eleanor nodded, her gaze softening for the briefest moment. "I understand. This world is not what you're used to." Mark didn't respond. He wanted to say more, but the words wouldn't come. He wanted to tell her that he didn't just feel out of place in her world, but in his own life. That he had traded his freedom, his future, for the promise of security, but now that he had it, it didn't feel like anything he had imagined. Eleanor seemed to sense his unease, but she said nothing. Instead, she reached for his hand, her touch light but firm. "We'll be all right," she said, her voice quieter now, almost like a promise. Mark met her gaze, and for a moment, he saw something in her eyes, something that wasn't just business. There was a flicker of something softer, something human. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by the cold professionalism he had come to expect. He looked down at their intertwined fingers, the touch both foreign and comforting. "All right," he whispered, unsure of what to make of the moment. They returned to the crowd, the noise of the gala swallowing them up once again. The evening passed in a blur, but Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. That maybe, just maybe, there was more to this arrangement than he had realized. After the gala, back in the mansion, Mark lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The events of the night kept playing over and over in his mind. Eleanor had been different tonight. Her usual composure had cracked, just a little. He could feel it, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had been right all along. That beneath her cold exterior, there was something else. Something real. Mark's heart began to race, and he turned onto his side, pulling the covers tightly around him. He couldn't afford to think like this. He had made his choice. But as he lay there in the silence, the question lingered. Was this all just a business arrangement? Or had he started to fall for Eleanor, despite everything? Narration. The following week passed much like the ones before it. Quiet, routine, and with a steady undercurrent of unease building inside Mark. The physical proximity to Eleanor was the same. They shared meals, attended meetings, appeared together at public events. But there was an increasing awareness inside him that things were beginning to shift. Eleanor still remained elusive, always professional, but Mark could no longer ignore the flickers of something more between them, something that he had never signed up for. At first, he thought it was just his mind playing tricks on him, but the more he observed her, the more he realized there was something deeper. It wasn't love, not yet, but there was something. One evening, as they sat together in her study, reviewing documents for an upcoming business deal, Mark noticed how her eyes softened when she looked at him. It was brief, but it was there. Just a glimmer of something. Was it kindness? Concern? He couldn't tell. And it made him uneasy. He had agreed to this arrangement because he needed security, for himself, for his family. But as Eleanor sat across from him, her cool professionalism still intact, he felt himself questioning everything. What had he really signed up for? Was this just a contract, or was he starting to want something more from her? As if sensing his turmoil, Eleanor finally spoke, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "Mark," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I know this is difficult for you. You didn't sign up for this. He looked up at her, caught off guard. No, I didn't, he admitted. But it's been easier than I thought. Eleanor nodded, her expression unreadable. That's good. You've adapted quickly. It was always meant to be a partnership, after all. Her words felt like a dismissal, but her eyes lingered on him, just a moment too long. Mark shifted uncomfortably, wondering if he was misreading things. Are you happy with the arrangement? Eleanor asked, her voice quieter now, as if she were searching for something in his answer. I'm grateful, Mark said, though the words felt hollow even to him. But sometimes I wonder if it's enough. Eleanor's lips parted, as if she were about to say something, but she stopped herself. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, she let out a sigh, leaning back in her chair. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, she said, her words so unexpected that Mark's heart skipped a beat. The deal is simple. 1 year. If you want out, you can leave whenever you like. There's no obligation beyond that. Mark stared at her, stunned. He had expected her to keep him in this arrangement, to make it difficult for him to walk away. But this was the first time she had given him an out. It made him feel conflicted, like he was standing on the edge of something, unsure whether to jump or pull back. Why? Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why offer me an out? Eleanor's gaze softened, just for a moment. Because I don't want to trap you, Mark, she said, her voice laced with something he couldn't quite place. I know this is a business arrangement, but I don't want you to feel like you're in a cage. That's not what this was meant to be. Mark swallowed hard. He couldn't decide if this was a sign of weakness on her part, or a rare moment of honesty. For a brief moment, he almost saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. I've never asked for much from anyone, Eleanor continued, her gaze drifting toward the window, but I wanted a partner I could trust, even if it's just for a year. I wanted someone who wouldn't judge me, who would understand that this life I lead comes with sacrifices, too. Mark's mind raced. He had no idea what she was asking of him, what kind of trust she was referring to. But for the first time since their agreement, he felt like he was actually seeing her, seeing the person behind the cold exterior. But it also made things more complicated. Could he trust her? Could he let himself trust her? He had started this arrangement with a clear goal, security. But now, something was pulling at him. He wasn't sure if it was the promise of something more, or just the longing for a real connection. But whatever it was slowly eating away at the wall he had built between them. I don't know what I want, Mark admitted, his voice cracking just a little. But I know I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to start feeling like I was more than just a name on a contract. Eleanor's eyes met his, and for the briefest second, he saw something flicker behind them. Maybe that's exactly what I wanted to hear, she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. Mark's heart raced as the silence between them stretched on. He was at a crossroads, and for the first time, he wasn't sure which way to go. Eleanor had given him a way out, but somehow, that didn't feel like the answer anymore. Was he willing to risk it all for a chance at something real, or would he walk away from the only stability he had ever known? The choice felt heavier than anything he had ever faced before. Narration: the following days felt different. Mark couldn't shake the conversation he had with Eleanor, the unexpected vulnerability she had shown. It lingered in his mind, making it impossible to focus on anything else. He had thought that his life had become a quiet routine, business meetings, charity events, and his role as Eleanor's husband in name only. But now, it felt like the ground beneath him was shifting. Eleanor had given him a choice, and for the first time, he wasn't sure what to do with it. She had offered him an out, told him he could leave the arrangement whenever he wanted. The temptation to walk away was strong, but something deeper inside him pulled him in the other direction. He had come into this deal thinking he was just securing his family's future, but now he was starting to question everything. Was this partnership really just a business deal? Or was there something more to Eleanor than he had first assumed? That night, after a long day of meetings, Eleanor called him into her study. Mark hesitated before stepping into the room, still unsure of what was going through his mind. Eleanor was standing by the window, her gaze lost in the city lights outside. As he entered, she turned toward him, her face soft, but with that same mask of calm professionalism. "Mark," she said quietly, "there is something I need to discuss with you." Her tone was different this time. No business urgency, no cold professionalism. It was almost personal. Mark walked in, his heart beating faster than usual. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice betraying his nervousness. Eleanor took a deep breath, her fingers lightly touching the papers on her desk. "This arrangement, it's not just for you," she said, her voice quieter now. "I didn't ask you to stay in this marriage just for convenience or business. I've started to realize something." Mark's mind raced as he processed her words. He had thought this was all about security, about the deal. But now, the air between them was thick with something unspoken. "What do you mean?" Mark asked. Eleanor turned her gaze back to him, her eyes searching his, as if looking for something. "I've spent so much of my life building a company, a legacy," she said softly. "And I forgot what it was like to have someone by my side. Not just as an accessory, but someone who could be a real partner. A real person." She took another deep breath, and Mark could see the vulnerability in her eyes, something he had never seen before. "I'm not asking for love, Mark," she continued, her voice a little shaky. "But I realize that I've been isolating myself for so long, hiding behind this perfect life that I created. Maybe I need someone who can just be real with me. Someone who doesn't look at me and see only a business deal." Mark was stunned. He had always seen Eleanor as this unapproachable, strong, and composed woman. He never thought for a second that she might feel the way she was describing. She was always in control, always a step ahead. But in that moment, he saw the cracks in her armor. She was human, just like him. And for the first time, he wondered if this deal was more than just a way for her to protect her legacy. "You're not alone in this," Mark said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "You don't have to be." Eleanor's eyes softened, and she took a step closer to him, the distance between them narrowing. For a moment, the world outside the study seemed to fade away. Mark's heart raced, but this time, it wasn't out of fear, it was something else, something new. He couldn't help himself. He reached out, his hand brushing hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at him, her expression unreadable but full of something Mark couldn't quite place. "I don't know what this is between us," he said quietly, "but I want to find out." Eleanor's gaze held his for a long, intense moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. I think I do, too," she whispered. The room was still, the tension hanging in the air between them. For the first time, Mark wasn't sure if he was making the right decision, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. Whatever this was, whatever was developing between them, it felt real. And maybe that was the first step toward something they both needed. Eleanor's voice broke the silence. "You've been more than I expected, Mark," she said softly. "And maybe I've been more than you expected, too." Mark smiled slightly, unsure of what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. They stood there for a long moment, hands touching, the connection between them undeniable. Neither of them knew what the next chapter would bring, but in that moment, they both knew one thing for sure: everything was about to change. Narration. In the days that followed, something undeniably shifted between Mark and Eleanor. Their conversations lingered longer, their silences felt warmer, and the once rigid line that separated their lives had begun to blur. But just when everything felt as if it was moving into a new, gentler rhythm, the world around them reminded them that nothing in Eleanor's life was ever simple. It started during a quarterly stakeholders meeting. Mark sat beside Eleanor, the polished oak table reflecting the tension that buzzed quietly in the room. Eleanor spoke with precision and authority, her posture straight, her voice calm. Mark watched her with a quiet admiration, but he also sensed something beneath the surface, a strain, a pressure she had never spoken about. Halfway through the meeting, an older board member named Richard Caldwell leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Mrs. Brooks, there have been questions regarding your recent marriage," he said, the words dripping with skepticism. "A sudden union with a young law student? People are talking. Investors are worried." The room fell silent. Eleanor's expression did not waver, but Mark could feel the tension coiling within her. Richard continued, "Your husband does not have a business background. He does not have the experience to represent this company. Some believe this marriage may compromise your judgment." Mark felt the heat rise in his chest. This marriage had been a contract, a business arrangement, but hearing it thrown at them like this ignited something deeper: anger, protectiveness. Eleanor spoke before he could. "My personal life is not up for debate," she said, her voice icy and controlled. Mr. Davis is my husband. That is all anyone needs to know. Richard did not back down. Well, perhaps the board deserves to know who exactly he is. If this marriage is authentic. If it is not, Mark pushed back his chair and stood, surprising even himself. I married Eleanor because I wanted to, he said, his voice steady even as adrenaline surged through him. You may not think I belong here, but I stand by her. I always will. The room went still. Richard blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting Mark to say anything at all. Eleanor glanced at Mark, and for the first time in a long time, something bright flickered in her eyes, something like gratitude. The meeting ended shortly after, but the tension lingered. Once they were alone in her office, Eleanor closed the door and turned to Mark. Her voice was soft, but her hands trembled slightly. You did not have to defend me, she said. Mark stepped closer, shaking his head. Yes, I did. Eleanor exhaled slowly, the strong exterior she always wore beginning to crack. Mark, everything is changing, she whispered. I did not expect any of this. I did not expect you to matter this much. The admission washed over him like a warm tide. He reached for her hand, the gesture both gentle and deliberate. You matter to me too, he said. For a long moment, they simply stood there in the quiet of her office, their hands intertwined, their breath steady. The contract that once defined their relationship suddenly felt irrelevant. What they were building now, whatever this was, felt real, felt earned. Eleanor lifted her eyes to his, and in them he saw something he had never seen before. Hope. Mark, she whispered, I think I am falling for you. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. Then fall, he said softly. I am right here. And for the first time since their arrangement began, Eleanor let herself lean into him. Not out of obligation, not out of necessity, but out of something real. Something she had not felt in years. Something they both had been running from. Love. Narration. The days following that night felt different. Mark and Eleanor no longer tiptoed around the boundaries of their arrangement. The tension that once defined their relationship had melted into something more natural, more honest. They found themselves spending more time together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Eleanor's world, once so cold and transactional, had softened in ways Mark never imagined possible. He could see it in the way she looked at him, the way her smile had changed from reserved to genuine. But just when things seemed to settle, the clock was ticking. The one-year mark of their arrangement was approaching fast, and with it, the question that lingered in the back of their minds. What came next? It wasn't a topic they discussed openly, but both of them knew that the end of the contract was inevitable. Mark had no illusions. He had entered this arrangement for security, for the chance to rebuild his family's future. But now, with every passing day, his feelings for Eleanor deepened. He wasn't just grateful for what she had given him. He had fallen in love with her. And he had no idea if she felt the same. One evening, as they sat in her living room, Eleanor turned to him, her eyes serious. Mark, she began, her voice soft but clear, the end of the contract is approaching. We both know it. Mark looked at her, his heart sinking in his chest. I know, he said quietly. He wasn't sure where she was going with this, but he had a feeling he wasn't going to like it. Eleanor sighed, a deep, heavy breath that seemed to carry all the weight of the past few months. I've been thinking, she continued, about what comes next. And I want to be honest with you. Mark's heart raced. He braced himself, unsure of what she would say. I know that this was supposed to be a business arrangement. That's how it started. But I've realized that it's become so much more than that. Eleanor said, her voice faltering just a bit. I don't want to let you go, Mark. I don't want this to end. Not like we agreed. Mark's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was saying. Did he hear that right? Did she just say that she didn't want to end their marriage? Eleanor continued, her eyes never leaving his. I know we never promised love, and I never expected to feel this way. But these months, they've changed me. They've changed us. Mark stood up slowly, his heart beating faster with each passing second. Eleanor, he whispered, the words catching in his throat. Are you saying you want us to continue? Eleanor nodded, her eyes softening with emotion. Yes, she said, her voice barely audible. I want to continue. I want to see where this can go. Not because of the contract, but because I want you. I want this life with you. Mark's head spun. For the first time since this whole arrangement began, everything felt right. His heart told him what his mind had been too afraid to admit. He loved her, but he needed to hear it from her. "I've fallen for you too, Eleanor," Mark said, his voice raw with emotion. "I didn't know when it happened, but I can't imagine my life without you. You've given me more than security. You've given me a future, and I want to build it with you." Eleanor's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for the first time, her mask completely slipped away. She reached for him, her hand trembling as she placed it on his cheek. "Then we will," she whispered. "We'll build it. Together. No more contracts. Just us. For real." And in that moment, all the walls that had once separated them crumbled. What had started as a business arrangement, a marriage forged out of necessity, had transformed into something neither of them expected. A partnership built on trust, understanding, and yes, love. As Mark leaned down to kiss her, the weight of their past, their fears, all melted away. They were no longer two people bound by a contract. They were two people choosing each other every single day for the rest of their lives. And with that kiss, they sealed their future, not as a deal, but as a promise. A promise of love, of partnership, and of a life they would create together, forever.